panel. We are hoping that Molly E. Lee will be joining us again in just a moment. She'd signed in for a minute before the event and then got kicked out, I think. So she may be having some technical issues. We're just going to keep an eye out for her to pop up on screen. But Destiny Soria will not be joining us this evening. She has been a little under the weather and she completely lost her voice today. So sadly, she won't be here. I do want to plug her book, Fire with Fire, that comes out on June 8th because it is amazing. It's epic fantasy with dragons, but also just a really gorgeous sister story. So you guys should definitely still check it out, even though she can't be with us this evening. But we have with us right now, Sophie Jordan, Zoe Hana Makuta, and Jordan Taylor. And we are thrilled to have these ladies with us. And again, hopefully Molly Lee will be joining us in just a little bit. But I am going to give some more thorough introductions of each of them and then let them tell you about their books. So I'm going to switch the view to speaker view so you can see whoever's introducing their book. So first is Sophie Jordan. She grew up in the Texas Hill Country where she wove fantasies of dragons, warriors, and princesses. A former high school English teacher, she's a New York Times, USA Today, and international bestselling author of over 30 novels, including The Me I Meant to Be and Kissing Lessons, and now forthcoming 16 Scandals, which is coming May 25th. She now lives in Houston with her family. When she's not writing, she spends her time overloading on caffeine, lattes preferred, talking plot lines with anyone who will listen, including her kids, and cramming her DVR with true crime and reality TV shows. So welcome, Sophie. And do you want to tell us a little bit about 16 Scandals?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming, hanging out with us tonight. I do have the book doesn't release, as Anna said, until the 25th, but I did get an early copy from my publisher, so I can hold it up. I'm excited, when the book comes in, you can smell it. Print books always smell good. I used to love going into bookstores just because of the smell, the paper smell. We haven't had, the luxury of doing so much of that lately, but, things are getting back to normal, so I'm very, very excited about it. 16 Scandals is a very, very loose homage to the 80s 16 Candles, but there's more differences probably than similarities, largely because this is a Regency set, historical young adult novel. I am an author of historical romance. In case you didn't know, I have a whole slew of historical romances I've been writing for over, I'm counting 12, 13 years. I think my first historical romance came out. And then I have other young adult novels I wrote, contemporary YA, as well as fantasy YA and paranormal YA. So I don't know. I was just having a moment where I was talking to a friend and I was like, I don't know why I've never written a historical YA. Why have I never done kind of what I'm doing in his adult historical romances and written that for kids, for teens. Of course, it's still for adults too, but it's just, it was different. So I was like, I don't know why. And I came up and I was like, and I could do something really fun with a title, and the title came to me in that same conversation. It was so instant. I was like, yeah, 16 Scandals, and it'll be like her 16th birthday. And of course it just fits in the Regency era that, the older sister, often who's already out in society, is all about getting a husband and getting married. And it was just the plot was just there. It was so easy. And then I just had to fill in the gaps in the story. So it does take place in one night at Vauxhall. My protagonist, Primrose, is feeling pretty rebuffed by her family. Everyone's all about her older sisters, in particular her oldest sister who's getting married. So she and her friends sneak out to Vauxhall Gardens for a wild night. And of course, there's going to be a romance in anything I write. So of course there is a dashing young man there who's named Jacob, which might or might not be, and again, a little wink to Jake Ryan. So I wanted to point out a couple fun things I did though. Other than the title 16 Scandals, I made a point. There's only 16 chapters in the book, haha. And there's a saying, an interstitial from this etiquette book that her mother shoves down her throat. There's an interstitial at every chapter. And then under it, Prim crosses it out and it's what she thinks that that interstitial should really be. The first one, because guys, my eyes have failed me. The first one is, a proper young lady should speak only a fraction above a whisper, lest she be considered a shrill termagant and brand herself unmarriageable. Well, my heroine crosses it out. She writes, there are far worse things than being deemed unmarriageable. ... Probably, period. So it's kind of just a fun, rompy YA historical Regency romance. So I hope y'all will pick it up on May 25th or download it.
Thanks, Sophie. It is so much fun, you guys. It is such a fun, and I've come to expect that, having read Sophie's adult historicals. There's a lot of shenanigans, and I love it so much. I also love that Primrose doesn't want to fit in the traditional box, but isn't like crazily forward thinking, which I feel like has been a trend in historical romance lately. She's not unbelievably she just doesn't want to necessarily settle down and marry right away.
Right. And I mean, when you think about it, she's 16, right? She just kind of wants to have fun too, not to be, so serious and right away on a quest for a husband.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Sophie. So I am going to introduce our next author. Molly E. Lee writes adult and young adult contemporary featuring strong female heroines who are unafraid to challenge their male counterparts, yet still vulnerable enough to have love sneak up on them. In addition to being a military spouse and mother of 2 plus 1 stubborn English bulldog, Molly loves hiking, enjoying the outdoors around her mountain home, and digging for treasures in antique stores. She's the author of Ask Me Anything, the Grad Night series, and the Love on the Edge series, and now Ember of Night, which came out on May 4th. So it is out already, and you guys, it is killer. So Molly, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ember of Night?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it took me a minute to get here. Hope you guys can hear me. I had to switch to like 15 different devices. I am, like she said, Molly E. Lee. I'm so happy to be here, and I am the author of Ember of Night. Hopefully you can see that photo. It is about a young girl who comes from a very broken home, and her main goal in life is to reach her 18th birthday and get her little sister out of this broken home. And if that wasn't a hard enough task, a hot stranger comes into her life and tells her she's the key to saving the world from a war between heaven and hell. And when the world hasn't been kind to her, she's not too keen on saving it. So it becomes this, challenge for her to work into that new world. So
I loved it so much. I feel like there has not been enough paranormal in the YA market recently, and I was so excited to see it, but it was just so gripping. I could not stop reading. I loved it so much. There are some hard subjects, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about later on, but it's totally worth it to read. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And then next we have Zoe Hana-Makuta, who currently attends the University of Washington in Seattle, studying English with a creative writing focus. She grew up in Boulder, Colorado, where she developed a deep love of Muay Thai kickboxing and nurtured a slow and steady infatuation for fictional worlds. When she is not writing, Zoe can be found embroidering runes onto her jean pockets, studying tarot or herbology, or curled up with a cup of caramel coffee and a good, bloody but heartwarming book. Gearbreakers is her debut novel, and it is coming June 29th. But I had the pleasure of reading it as an ARC, you guys, for this event. And oh my gosh, I cannot say enough how much I love this book. It is sapphic cyberpunk, which I think you're probably going to see on all of the marketing everywhere, but it is amazing. So Zoe, you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, thank you so much for the intro. Like you mentioned, Gearbreakers it does have a sapphic romantic subplot between 2 girls who are half Korean, like I am. So I wanted to put that representation into my first book, especially. There is a sequel coming out next year. I actually just finished editing one of the versions this morning, so we're getting there. But more plot-wise, it's about these 200-foot tall mechanical deities, mechas worshipped as deities, that are just wreaking havoc in the desert. and there are these renegades called gear breakers, and they're essentially just a bunch of kids who are like born onto the side of the war, who are tasked with hunting down these mechas and infiltrating them and taking them down from the inside. But on the opposite side of the gear breakers are the pilots, and one of the love interests, Sona Steelcrest, is one of these cyborg pilots, and she meets Eris, who is a gear breaker, and they basically work over the novel to highlight the humanity in one another. There's a really big emphasis I try to put on how you're kind of like born on the side that you grew up with, and it kind of messes with you basically, and it's really hard to empathize with someone who is just seen as different from you. So there's larger themes there, but there's also a contemporary spin to it that I really like, as the girls fall in love and they are fighting gods together and they're falling in love. It was just a blast to write, really. Lots of found family, especially because I love that trope, and just basically writing it for myself because just the mecha trope, the found family trope, and the Korean and queer representation. It's just, I'm trying to put out what I would want to read, or what I needed when I was in the YA age range. I just want people to find a little bit of hope in it, how you can like find yourself and the people you love, even though they're not supposed to be the people you love sometimes.
And what's amazing to me about Gear Breakers is that it is dealing with a lot of really big issues, and it still manages to be just a lot of fun.
Great.
But, so thank you so much. And now, last but not least, Jordan Taylor is a New York City-based writer and journalist, currently the deputy editor at Men's Health magazine. Her work has appeared in the New York Observer, Mic, and Glamour.com, and she is the author of Don't Breathe a Word, that comes out on May 18th, so next Tuesday. It is a YA suspense novel set in 2 different timelines. I am not normally a suspense reader, but I could not stop reading it. I'm pretty sure that's the one I was up until 3 a.m. finishing, because I started reading it at bedtime and was like, I can't, like, I need to go to sleep because I have work in the morning, but I need to know how this ends though. So do you want to tell us a little bit about it, Jordan?
I would love to, and Anna, I'm so happy to hear that. That's like the review of my dreams. Thank you so much. Also, Zoe, Sophie, and Molly, like, your book sounds so great. I can't wait to read them. It's an honor to be on a panel with you all. And I'm so excited to tell you about Don't Breathe a Word. I have her here. So the relevant backstory to understand why I wrote this book, the first piece is that when I was in college, I found out that my school in the Cold War constructed a nuclear fallout shelter underneath the campus. And I became so obsessed with it that I would go hunting for the fallout shelter. And I think you can see my husband through the door behind me right there. When we were in college, I would drag him on these expeditions with me in all of the basements of the school trying to find the fallout shelter, and we never did. But I kind of had it in the back of my brain that someday I would love to write a book about a nuclear fallout shelter underneath a school campus. And what I also really wanted to explore in this book is the idea of, you know, the twisted things that people will sometimes do in order to belong. I was really obsessed with this idea of belonging. And so I thought about bringing these things together, and the result was Don't Breathe a Word. So it takes place at an elite boarding school in upstate New York, where I actually am right now. And the boarding school is called Hardwick Preparatory Academy. And in the present day, there's a girl named Eva, she's in the 11th grade, but she's a brand new student. She's lonely, she doesn't have any friends. And so she's very excited when she's tapped to join a secret society called the Fives. And the Fives have a lot of very strict rules, but one of them is that all of their members have to agree to protect Hardwick's dark secrets from the past. So what the heck happened in the past? We go back to 1962. It's the height of Cold War paranoia, and Hardwick has constructed a nuclear fallout shelter underneath the school. And Connie, who's another 11th grade student, is persuaded to join a test of the nuclear fallout shelter because her crush is going to be down there. And it turns out once all these students are shut in there for a long weekend, they discover the teacher who is in charge of the experiment actually has a very twisted social experiment planned for the 6 participants. And so the 6 of them are shut in there for a long weekend, only 5 come out. And over the course of the book, you find out how Eva and Connie's stories intertwine and how the secret society has been controlling this boarding school for decades. That's my pitch.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I always kind of like to start on YA panels the conversation with like, why YA? And I know some of you have written in different age levels, so maybe why YA for this book? What about this story you decided that YA was the thing you wanted to do? And I'm going to start with Zoe. Do you want to answer that first, since you're just first on my screen?
Oh yeah, sure. It was just my favorite genre growing up. It was always something that stuck with me. Plus, when I started writing Gear Breakers, I was the same age as my protagonist, and I thought that was really cool. Just for like personally, just because I felt like I was growing up with them. Now I'm older, right? But like, I don't know. I'm definitely using it as like a medium for exploring. I think how we grow, or like kind of just like figuring out what's important when you grow up. I think that's a theme that's really prevalent in the YA age range. I think it's very interesting. So.
Jordan?
Yeah, I can jump in. So I debuted last year at the start of the pandemic, but my debut was also YA historical fiction. And what I personally really love about writing for a young adult audience is that, I think about the books that I read when I was in the young adult market and how they really helped me shape my worldview and think about the kind of person that I wanted to be in the world. And so, even more so than I think books you read as an adult. And so it's really cool for me now as an author to be able to, explore messages that might help shape, today's teens, thinking about who they want to be in the world. In my first book, The Paper Girl of Paris, was about the French Resistance, and it was really special for me to be able to put out a message about resistance last year. And now with Don't Breathe a Word, exploring these ideas of how do we sometimes compromise our own personal morals and convictions in order to feel like we're accepted in a group. I think that's really relevant when you're going through your teenage years. And so to be able to read a story about 2 girls that are put in really challenging positions where they have to decide how, to what degree they want to compromise their own morals, and ultimately come out, well, I won't spoil anything, but, to follow their decision-making process through that challenge, I hope will be inspiring for teen readers. And it's just really cool to help people, shape who they want to be in the world.
Awesome. Sophie? Oh, did we lose Sophie?
No, you didn't lose
Oh.
me. Sorry. My phone is synced to all my stuff, and my mom keeps trying to call me.
Oh, no.
And I keep decline. I kind of touched on it a lot just because, having cut my teeth. The first historical romance novel I ever read, I was probably 13 years old, and I stole it from my grandmother's nightside table, and it was pretty eye-opening to go from like Beverly Clearly to, whatever. I can't even tell you who it was. Maybe it was Kathleen Woodward. I don't know, but it was just like, wow, it was just a big jump. And I don't know why there aren't more historical, Regency set historical romances like you find in the adult genre. Why aren't there some that are like that in YA? I know years ago, I think Avon did have a line, like Meg Cabot wrote one, but that's what it's like. Everyone's like, wait, you remember that one like back in 1995? And I'm like, no, there should be more. There should definitely be more. So, and I just knowing the genre so well and writing so many books that have been set in ballrooms and in Vauxhall Gardens, and it was just second nature. And I think it's a great thing if I can like, if it can serve as a stepping stone for teen readers and introduce them to the, to adult romance, but also the historical romance genre, which of course is my first love. And I think it's it's in a very empowering genre, about women seeking their own satisfaction and fulfillment and their happily ever after in the face of all odds. I think that is a super powerful message. So yeah, I'm out there. I'm like, let me grab them young with 16 Scandals, and hopefully they'll come on board and they'll read my adult books. Then they'll read Sarah MacLean and Diana Quincy and Joanna Shoup and, everybody else. So yeah, I did it for love, but maybe a little bit of a mission in there too. So.
And Molly?
I love that all so much. All of their answers ring so true. And I guess the only thing I would have to add to it is just that I love young adult because there's so many possibilities that in adult literature you don't have. Like, you have so many firsts and you have so many new experiences that you get to live on the page with these characters that you love. And some of them are so much more high stakes than they would be if they were an adult, and some of the reactions and the dialogue that you get back and forth. I just love how different and raw and vulnerable it is compared to some of the, adult things that I've written. The two reactions are completely different because of the age range. And I absolutely love like the endless possibilities that you have with so many firsts in that age range. So that's one of my favorite things to write about young adult is all the firsts.
Awesome. Okay, so you guys all have really strong heroines who are struggling with some kind of vulnerability, right? And I love that because as a young woman, like, I did not like the idea that like women were supposed to be meek and weak. But I also didn't want to feel like I had to be perfect all the time. So I love seeing that represented in YA today, that we can be strong and independent and individual, but also be struggling with some stuff. So how do you guys come up with these awesome heroines? Like, and how do you figure out what their vulnerability is going to be? So Sophie, you want to start? You talked about strong women.
I don't know. I just think struggle is such a part of life. It wasn't you kind of have to focus and think about the story and think about the plot. And in 16 Scandals, of course, a lot of it was family struggle, family drama, which, I know something about. This was a hard year. There was a lot of push and pull. I have a senior. She's graduating in like 2 weeks. And her at home doing virtual learning and not being able to really have that normal senior year, with her friends and her boyfriend, and it just wasn't fair. I know that, but it was hard and it was very difficult. And there was tears and moments, and I'm not going to lie. I sometimes, in one of those nights where there were tears, I sometimes go and journal, and I have been known to use some of those sentiments and those emotions, even though the struggle I might write about is entirely different in my book. The emotions can be recycled almost to be used. Like, I had a lot of fodder to tap into this last year. I don't know about the rest of you, but yeah, I mean, in Primrose's case, a lot of it, the struggle is with is mother-daughter, and wanting, oh my gosh, I wrote this before the pandemic, but I swear, like, her wanting to have fun and mom not letting her have fun. Feels like wait a minute, I did write this before the pandemic, but and her mom could be argued, you've read it, Anna, that her mom is the straight up villain of the book.
Is she not? She's not supposed to be the villain? Because I definitely read her as the villain.
I guess so. I mean, she's definitely a bit of, Mrs. Bennet too. There is a bit of clueless insensitive, social climbing Mrs. Bennett to her. And yeah, and Primrose is fighting against all of that and wanting to be, you know, her own self, and not necessarily wanting to follow all the rules and the values that are important to her mother. They are not priorities for her. So, I mean, that it might be a Regency historical, but that's something that can be echoed in so many people's lives today, and, you know, families today. And my protagonist is going through it, but certainly someone, you know, who picks up this book might be like, yeah, I get that. I get having different values than my own family members, but they're my family and this is who I have, you know?
Right. Jordan, you want to go next?
I'm sitting here and I'm like, you know what? It's time. I'm going to tell them the harrowing story that inspired both of the characters in this book. So when I was coming up with Eva and Connie, both of who, like I was saying before, struggle with this question of like, how far would you go for acceptance? I think about the summer that I was 13 and I was at Jewish sleepover camp, which was like this yearly tradition in my life. And I was not a cool kid. I was like really, really into theater. I was really into books, which I feel like everyone on this panel would agree that that sounds cool. But at my camp, it was not cool. So at the same time, I felt so strongly about the things that I was into, but I also desperately wanted to be liked by the kids that were really, really cool in my cabin. And one summer we were staying in this old cabin that had a fireplace, and the fireplace was boarded up from the inside. However, there was a chimney on top of the cabin that still connected down to the fireplace. And this summer there had been a series of like bear attacks. And so the girls in my cabin decided that in order to not get attacked by bears, for some reason, we had to store our candy at the bottom of the chimney, because the idea was that maybe the bears would enter the cabin, get the candy. The only way to avoid this was to throw the candy down the chimney. I can't explain the rationale of my 13-year-old cabin mates, but this was the rationale. And so we threw the candy down the chimney, of course, nobody realizing that when we wanted to eat the candy, it was at the bottom of a chimney. And so I thought, you know, I have never been accepted by these girls. You know, they all think I'm like the weird reading kid. Well, maybe I could be the daring one who says, I'm gonna rescue the candy from the bottom of the chimney. And so this was my moment of having to decide how far I would go to be accepted by these girls. And I let them dangle me by my ankles down a chimney to get the candy. Right? Like, and we're 13, okay? They're holding me by my ankles down the chimney. And I think maybe it went through my head that if they let go, I 100% would have like fallen on my head. And it didn't matter to me in that moment because I wanted them to like me so badly. And like, how sick is that? So I've thought about that. I was fine. That spoiler alert, I was fine. I'm still here. I don't think we got the candy and, you know, whatever, but I have thought about that moment for my entire life ever since then. It has stuck with me. And I feel like in writing this book and exploring this idea, it has helped me like reckon with this formative experience in my life, and also maybe like forgive myself a little bit for letting myself be put in that position, because writing Don't Breathe a Word helped me explore just how difficult it can be when, especially when you're a teenager and you're in that really difficult situation. So that's how I created my two heroines, Eva and Connie. They're both a little bit different. Eva's more outgoing and Connie is more introverted, but they both, I think, are inspired by that really formative and dark experience in my life. I have never told that story in public ever, so that was a big deal actually for me to talk about it.
That sounds really terrifying. So I feel like you being terrified by it, totally rational response. I am not a mental health professional, but I'm just saying, I feel like I would also still be terrified by that.
Thank you.
Molly, would you like to go next?
Oh man, I'm just like over here like in shock over that story. Like it was giving me literal anxiety when she said she was dangling down the chimney. I'm like, I want to help you. Oh, your 13-year-old self. That was really that's awesome that you were able to use that and power through it for your characters. I can't wait to read your book. I'm so pumped.
Thanks, Mom.
I'm like totally still with you in that story. It's such a good, it's a good story, but sad story. But anyway, awesome. Anyway, for Harley's character, for a lot of my female characters, I do try to really get inside their head and listen to their voices and kind of see what their vulnerability is to go with their edgier side. Because I like to write a little bit of an edgier female. But for Harley, she was really quiet with me. It took me a long time to actually dig her voice out. She's incredibly stubborn. And I realized she's got a lot of my personal experiences from the past in her journey. And that was probably one of the reasons why she was so stubborn. But once I got her voice out, I realized that her vulnerability basically came down to struggling with dealing with, you're not always meant to be what you're born into. Like it doesn't matter where you were born or what kind of family you were born into. You have to decide how to act and how to choose your own fate. And basically her experiences are pretty dark, and she needed to take ownership of how she wanted her future to look. And it's a very big step for somebody that's only 17, 18. But she had this really compelling reason, which is her younger sister. She would do anything for her. It's like her heart. So she had a really great reason. And I feel like it was just an exploration of, with the right reasons, you can do the wrong things, and with the wrong reasons, you can do the right things, and just kind of playing with those themes of, you're the master of your own happiness, and you don't need anybody's permission to be happy or to define what your idea of happiness is. And so that's kind of where Harley's all generated from.
And Zoe?
Yeah, so my book has like a lot of child soldiers in it, basically, or what the girls are. And that kind of trope, it's I don't know. I feel like in the YA I read before, it's I don't know. They're always like the really like hard-hearted renegades. You're supposed to be unfeeling because you're going to lose people, and that's what the Gearbreakers and the pilots are really raised to just go forward with their life. And I wanted, basically, like, when they meet each other, it's kind of like cracking that apart. Like, actually, like, even though you might lose people, it's kind of like what makes it worth it. Like, sometimes what you need to protect is what you need to fight for, is what you need to lose. And it kind of, I don't know, it raised the stakes in a way. I feel like I could have had it just all have been action and just like badass girls, and they can't be brought down, and they're fine. But I gave them bleeding hearts, so they have something to lose, I suppose. But I think that's also like a strength in itself, is like being accepting of that, like, you're gonna be vulnerable, and it's like inevitable, maybe not inevitable, but there's strength in vulnerability, because it does give you those higher stakes. Is it actually?
Okay, and this is a thing that I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't really notice until just now when we were talking. All of your books have kind of complex sister relationships in them. It was really obvious in one of them, but now, like, a couple of you mentioned the sister, and I was like, what? Wait, they all have complex sister relationships. So can we talk about that? Okay, first of all, how many of you have sisters that you have complicated relationships with? All right, so then it's weird, really, that all.
I know, I don't even have a sister at all.
So
wait, does anybody have a sister in here?
I have a sister. Yeah.
Okay,
It's not really a complicated relationship at all. I have an older sister, and no, it's not complicated. I mean, we're sisters, so there is tension at some points, but no, she's like just amazing, and she's an inspiration, and she's the reason I write, because she's my older sister, and she always wrote, and I always wanted to be like her. So it's just, it's not complicated, but.
Well, can we explore that for a minute? Like, how'd the sisters come to be in your books? because they serve very different purposes and the plots for each of you guys, which I feel like I'm probably the only one that's read all of your books back to back at this point, so you may not all know that. But for each of you, how did that sister relationship come to be, and why did it feel important to include it? Because in a lot of YA, we don't see much of the family at all. We see the main character, but not the family, and all of you included sisters.
I mean, well, my plot was set up where I knew there would be one sister because she was the one that was out in society and on the verge of marriage, and all the attention was on her. So I think, as a writer, I'm all about keep layering the conflict. So whereas I had one foil for my protagonist, I'm like, let's throw some more in. let's make it even, let's magnify this in some way. So there's the sister that's on the verge of marriage and everything's about her. And then there's a sister that's already married that has children already. And then there's a sister that is still on the market and the mom's disappointed because she has not yet, scored a suitor or a fiance. So I kind of liked, during this Regency area, just capturing all the different phases of where a woman could find herself. Really, you have the one that has the pressure, who's on the marriage mart and has the pressure every season to, get a proposal, get engaged, and how each season, I think it's the third season that the sister that's the closest in age to my protagonist, it's her third season without an offer. So her humiliation is just going up every year. And then there's the sister who is engaged and he is wealthy, but flawed, but they're blind to that because he's wealthy. And then there's the sister who is married with kids, and clearly the marriage is not spectacular. So it just felt like my protagonist, Primrose, she's in it's almost a rare situation that she's able to look at all three of her older sisters and see that I don't want any of this. I don't want this life or this life or this life. But, I guess she kind of recognizes that right at the onset of the book, because it does take place like in 24 hours, and she's going to seize her night and go out to Vauxhall and live for herself, and not ask permission, something that her sisters don't do. But I guess, and I don't know, it would have been different with brothers. I couldn't really do, it couldn't move my story in that same way.
That's true. It was different for men back then, which your book also does a great job of illustrating.
Yeah, thank you.
Sophie, when you talk about like how the sisters move the story, I feel like that's the same reason that I decided to give Eva a sister, because I'm always thinking really strategically about how can I make sure that the stakes are high enough to make the reader want to continue moving through the story. And so I really needed to show why it was so important for Eva to make friends at the school, and why she would be so excited to join the secret society and go through their really intense, messed up initiations. And so in order to create those stakes, I gave her a sister who is like the favorite child in the family and who didn't get sent away to boarding school for bad behavior and wins all the awards and is so beloved. And so Eva, the sister, makes it so that Eva already feels like an outsider in her own family. Like her own family doesn't want her. They sent her away to boarding school, and now she has no friends at boarding school. So wow, she is really gonna like be willing to go the distance in order to be accepted. So for me, giving her a sister, like you said, it helped move the story forward. It helped give me the necessary stakes to make it a really exciting plot.
Yeah, there's something about writing the sister that's the one who's the have-not or the underdog, or, and having that older sister who's doing everything right just highlights all that. It's true. Yeah. There's a book, I don't know, it's an old book, it's a Suzanne Brockman or something. All I remember when you were talking is I kept thinking about, it's about, and Anna, you might remember the title. There's obviously someone watching right now who's going to know the title of this book. Like, so they kidnapped the president's daughter. The president has two daughters, but only one is like really beloved and like America's first daughter, and nobody cares about the other one. And they got the wrong daughter. And when the kidnappers realize this and they pull the hood off her head, they're like, oh, I'm going to say a bad word. They were like, oh shit, you got the wrong one. And they're so disappointed. They like just dump her. They send her back. Like, that just makes me think of this whole thing with sisters. Like, wow, how bummed and lowering would that be, where you're like, even the kidnappers sent me back because I wasn't the good sister.
Okay, I'm gonna find out what that book is because now I want to read it.
Yes.
Zoe, what about the sisters in your book?
So the sisters in my book, it's Jenny and Eris. So Jenny is Eris's older sister, and she leads the Gear Breakers. And and Eris basically like is living not really in her shadow, but Jenny also is like there to represent like all the, because she has the good Gear Breaker conditioning where she's hard-hearted, and she's basically using she uses Eris like as one of her pawns to get their side to win. Like it's a weird balance because Jenny of course cares about her, but like it's like for the good of the whole. So there's like that balance that she has to play with. But then Jenny, like I put her in, I don't have an older sister, but I took her name from my older cousin who I basically grew up with. And she's nothing like Jenny. Jenny's like really mean and violent, but she was just like a blast to write, honestly. She has like total god complex. She's taking down these gods and coming home, and like she makes all the weaponry for the Gear Breakers, and she's just like ruthless. And I don't know, I wanted some kind of like blood relation between her and Eris, because I felt like I like connected Eris to like all the dogmas they used growing up, but they're also like just ridiculous toward each other, and it's almost like a little bit of relief in the manuscript that it's just like the irritating just siblings irritating each other basically. So a bit of light there for all those reasons.
Right, and Molly, like your sister story is clearly much more central, so it makes a lot more sense, but do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, with Harley and the upbringing she's had a very hard upbringing, and one of the hard topics, she has an abusive father. And so when her little sister Ray comes into her life, she's a little bit older, and she just has this shift in her that it's just that magical shift that I feel like a child can bring into your life, a sibling, a child, it's, whatever. She knows that she has something to live for, and that she has a responsibility to try to make her life better. And it's just because she would never want anybody to go through what she went through. So she dedicates her entire life to just basically keeping her little sister out of the line of sight of her father. And she does a really good job. And it's her heart. It's like her light. Like Harley's just got this darkness about her, and Ray is just this beacon of light and positivity and it's because of Harley. It's because Harley took all the darkness and was, allowed Ray to come up in a not the best home, but in a way that she was incredibly more optimistic, and she sees the world in all kinds of beautiful colors. Whereas Harley is just like, all of this is gray and I'm over it, but I'm going to stick it out so I can take care of her. And so it was incredibly central. And when Harley was going through so much, in the character sketches of like bringing her to life, when I thought of this, I was like trying to think of something that would be worth everything to her, and Ray just materialized, and that was that. It was like the bond between sisters, the one that they have, it just couldn't be broken, and it was something that could ground Harley when all she wants to do is spiral off the planet. So that's how I thought of it.
Okay, so let's talk about endings a little bit. And attendees, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat or the Q&A. I am keeping an eye on that now. But obviously we're not going to spoil the ends of your books, but you guys have written in some very different subgenres. So like in Sophie's historical romance, there's going to be a happily for now and a YA. So there is a kind of ending you have to get to, but do you guys start knowing where the book is going to end? Or is it just kind of you start writing and at some point you're like, oh no, I guess this is what's happening now? Zoe, you want to go first?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jordan, please go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I was gonna say I'm a really meticulous plotter. I plan out every step of the way. I know exactly how it's gonna end, and it personally, like, there's no one right way to do it. Everybody has their own style that works best for them. But for me personally, I find it really nice to know where I'm going, and it saves me from writing myself into a corner and then having to go back. So I plan out the whole story in like a 4-act structure, and it helps me. But I'm curious to hear about everyone else's processes.
I hope at some point I will be like as meticulous as you, because I just kind of go. I don't put together a synopsis until I'm like 75% of the way through, and my editor's like, please, can I have one? And then I'll put it together just for her, figure it out. But I can definitely see the benefit of it, because my first drafts are just like, there's continuity problems, there's like thematic issues that I just kind of glance over the first time through. It kind of lines up, but like, eventually. But I don't know, just for like the outline, I always feel like I'm spoiling it for myself if I try to push ahead. Usually when I like make synopses, on the rare occasion, I'll like not follow them. But the process of writing one out, even if that is, I know it's not gonna like hold any meaning, that is like a brainstorming session almost. So it does help in that regard. But otherwise, I just have to sit down and do it, because I feel like, I don't know, just when I have the burst of energy to sit down and write, that's what I put my energy into. What works for me.
All right, Molly.
Yeah, I'm just like Jordan. I'm a super plotter. Like I have to have like a chapter by chapter outline and like a 2 little lines of what I think's gonna happen. So definitely for Ember of Night, it ends on a cliffhanger, as lots of people have been shouting at me over the Instagram, which I love. I love hearing from everybody, and it's so much fun. But it's funny because like I will plot and I will have this whole process, and it takes that anxiety off of me to know, hey, tomorrow you're gonna write this scene. But I usually stray from it, but always try to bring it back. But yeah, with Ember of Night, I knew immediately it was going to be a cliffhanger, and I was just going to see if my editor was going to let that fly or not. And luckily she loved it, so we got to keep it, because I didn't know, because it's always 50-50 with those. So especially with YA Paranormal, it needed to end there, because there's an entire book of questions left that need to be addressed. So I felt like it was a good place.
And Sophie.
Yeah, everything every one of you has said resonates. Like I do a little of that, I do a little of this, a little of that. Every book that I've done different one. I've done a book where I plotted a series once on Scrivener, and I've never gone back to it again, because that kind of stressed me out. Doing the whole Scrivener's a software program where, yeah, like every scene I plotted it very carefully. I can plot. I tend to really, when I'm starting a book, I take a long time getting started. It's just a lot of daydreaming in that time period and writing notes. I like writing. I like the act of writing longhand. When you break a finger, you kind of had to. So that encouraged me to this. So the book I have due next week I wrote it longhand almost the entire book. I've never done that with a book. Like 90% of it was longhand, then I transcribed it. But it was kind of interesting, because that process was, writing's a little slower, so I was thinking more. And then when I transcribed, it was like I was revising it too, like, because I was reading it out loud and transcribing, and I would tweak things and add a couple sentences that weren't even on the paper. So that was kind of a cool experience. I don't think I am going to give that up. I think I might continue to do that. But I generally, if I have the ending, it's smooth sailing. Like if I know the ending of the book, that's a great day. Like it makes the process so much better. Like Jordan was saying, I don't write myself into these like tangents and go off, because I know exactly where I'm going the whole time. In 16 Scandals, it took place like in such a short period of time. I do think I was pretty well plotted in the beginning and the middle, but I wasn't sure about the ending till I was closer to the ending. And that's not a lot of fun, because then I usually stop altogether. I'm like 2/3 through a book and I just stop. And I'm like, what? Okay, I gotta think. And I do. I'll take like a week or two where maybe this is what some people call writer's block. But it was a process for me. Even when I'm not writing, I'm working it through in my mind, and talking to other, the people that you rely on to plot with and talk through your book, talking to them. And that's always useful, because even if they are saying things that don't work, the fact that you're rejecting them is helping you arrive at why and what maybe can work. So yeah, so that I really feel like I'm in between that total pantser and total plotter. I'm right in the middle of that.
Okay, and then we are running short on time. So last, what's coming next? And Sophie, I know your next is probably an adult,
Yes.
but
But
do you
I'm
know what
almost
your
done.
next YA will be?
So I have a historical that's coming out at the end of July called The Duke Goes Down. I had a lot of fun making up that title. Actually, I submitted that title as a joke. Like I'm gonna submit because the hero was a duke, and his life sort of at the beginning of the book, his life is falling apart. He's lost his title. So I was like, oh, it should be called The Duke Goes Down, because that's kind of funny. It's got a double meaning there, and it's a little naughty, and there's no way they're gonna take it, and they took it. So surprise. You never know when you submit titles, if you don't like it, don't submit it, because they might love it. But I did like it. I just was surprised that it got greenlit. And then I have another historical romance, the one that's due next week. And after that, I'm under contract for 2 more historical romances, but I don't know. I'm kind of like, well, we'll see how well. If historical YA, if historical Regency set romance YA does well enough, maybe there'll be more in the future. So we'll see. I do have ideas for other, even though it is important to note, I don't think I've said it necessarily, this is a standalone. It's not, there doesn't have to be, there is no sequel. There's not even a companion book in the works, but there could be more Regency set YAs, because I have them in my mind. So
Okay, just gonna throw this out there, Sophie, while I have you. You know what could be fun though is the sister who's been on the Marriage Mart. There's kind of some implication that maybe there's some stuff going on, and if you just wanted to do a novella about that,
there is a hint about her sister on the Marriage Mart. There is a reason why she might not like all those boys her mom keeps throwing at her. So that would be fun to write. I would have fun writing that.
Okay, and Molly, what's next from you? Please tell me it's the next in this series, because I need
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah, I just turned in the first draft this week, so I'm super excited. It's yet to be titled. We're still working on the title, but it will be the sequel to Ember of Night. And as I said, it ends on a cliffhanger. So it's actually going to release in November. So I'm pretty pumped, because it's not like a year-long wait. So everybody that's shouting at me, it's coming out in November, so it's going to be okay. Keep shouting at me, because I love it.
And Zoe, will it be the next Gear Breakers?
Yes, Gear Breakers 2. I think, oh my gosh, I just got emailed the release date, but I don't remember specifically. It's June of next year. Is when the sequel.
Because speaking of cliffhangers, ma'am,
Sorry.
your book. And I wasn't 100% sure if it was the first in a series or if it was meant to be a standalone. So that ending, it's like, I'm a little mad about this.
Well,
but if there's going to be another one, I forgive you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, originally, my editor was only going to take the first one. I had planned a duology, but she was only going to take the first one. And originally, she was like, let's just leave the ending as it is. I was like, okay. I would be so mad, but it came around.
And Jordan, what about you?
So I'm in 5-day countdown mode until the release of Don't Breathe a Word. I'm so excited. And this is also standalone. So I will be just celebrating her for a while. And just this afternoon, I sent in some new pages to my agent for a new YA historical fiction idea that I have. So everybody put some positive energy
Yay.
into the universe for me.
Exciting.
How that goes. So hopefully there's more fun YA in my future.
Yay. Okay, and we do just have a couple more minutes left. And when we have a little bit of time, I always like to ask, because we often have prospective authors in the audience, whether they are willing to speak up or not. Do you guys have just like a quick piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to be a writer? And Molly, you want to go first? I'm not sure you've gone first yet.
Sure. I would say there's so much. I love talking to aspiring writers. So if you are, message me, we can chat. I would say write your own story. Write the story only you can tell, because it's going to come out on the page way more than if you're trying to do something because you feel like you need to put yourself in a box. Don't put yourself in a box. Write your own story. That passion is going to come through on the page, and readers are going to respond to it. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Jordan?
I really didn't think that on this YA panel I was going to be quoting Seth Rogen on the cover of GQ magazine, but he said something that has really stuck with me for a few years. And he said, keep going because everybody else gives up. And I think it's so true. Like, just if you love writing, just don't stop, don't quit. I wrote like 3 books that all got rejected before I sold my debut. So keep going. Like, if you get a rejection, like, you'll learn from it and you'll do better the next time.
Zoe?
Yeah, I would say you just have to keep in mind that like your writing is always productive, and it's always like, even if it's like not toward a publishing path, it's like every single word you write is going to go into developing your own voice and your own style. It's just you just keep practicing. Basically, you're refining an art, I think, is the core of it. I think it's good to remember.
And Sophie?
I love everybody's advice. I love all of this. You know, what can I say? That I agree with everybody. I think you need to read, and I think you need to read a lot, and you need to be varied and read across genres. And this is the thing: if there's a book that has a lot of buzz and everybody's talking about it, and even you're like, oh, that's not really my thing, I don't read in that genre, read it. I think everyone should. If there's a book that's so hugely popular that everybody's talking about it, you should read it for the sake of research. You should read it to just kind of approach it with an open mind and think about, you know, what's the appeal here? Why do readers like it? Now, there's something to be said, like, once you become a writer, you read critically. You do. It's okay. You can still read to enjoy and read for pleasure, but I think you should be reading with an open mind, looking at what they're doing that's interesting, you know, appreciating the context, the story, the pacing, the characterization, whatever it may be, and what doesn't work, and what you don't like. Yeah, I walk into bookstores and it's research. It's fun and it's exciting, but it's our craft. This is what we do. You can study the business side of writing as much as you know, there's workshops and classes and conferences that are devoted to it, or there used to be, but never stop being a student of craft.
Awesome. You know, when you were talking about that, though, I feel like that's how we read as booksellers too, which I've never really thought about, that we kind of read like writers read. So I have that in common with writers, even though I am not all one. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. I am so excited about all your books. I do just want to mention again to the attendees that Ember of Night is out now. Don't Breathe a Word comes out next Tuesday. Sophie's 16 Scandals comes out on May 25th. And Zoe's Gear Breakers comes out on June 29th. So you can come and pick Ember of Night up from us now, but you can pre-order any of the other books from us and we will get them to you on release day. So thank you, attendees, for coming. Thank you so much, authors, for being here. I adored all of your books so much. I am not going to stop talking about them. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.